allow us to reintroduce ourselves.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Black Refresh 2020. I am your host, Todd Inman, and today we are very fortunate and blessed to have Dr. Walter E. Williams. He has been a professor of economics at George Mason University in Northern Virginia since 1980. From 1995 through 2001, he was a department chair. He's also the author of over 150 publications. He has authored 10 books, including his autobiography, Up From the Projects. In fact, a documentary called Suffer No Fools was based on his autobiography. He's made scores of TV and radio appearances, including being a substitute host for Rush Limbaugh. Good morning, Dr. Williams. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning.
So just getting right in, being sensitive to your time, Dr. Williams, I just want to read the definition of a libertarian, and if you could please let me know, kind of where you stand on that, and am I correct that some variation of this definition supports your ideology? Libertarians strongly oppose any government interference into their personal, family, and business decisions. Essentially, they believe all Americans should be free to live their lives and pursue their interest as they see fit, as long as they do not harm anyone else. So, Dr. Williams, how does that fit in or compare to your personal ideology?
Well, that's probably it.
Okay, very good. Very good. So, just, I guess as an aside, how long have you, supported that ideology?
Oh boy, it's been a while. I guess at least 50 years or so.
Okay, 50 years. And
yeah.
Okay, that's terrific. And so, Dr. Williams, as far as, learning a little bit about you through my research, you were raised in the Richard Allen Projects in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
That's right.
You were raised by your mother.
Yeah.
And in some of the content that I did take a look at, you speak about the importance of fathers. And obviously it appears that because you were raised by your mother, your father wasn't very involved. So how would you?
My real father was not very involved, but my mother remarried during the 50s, and so there was I guess some kind of a fatherly involvement in my life.
Okay, very good. So, with actually, so your environment, or I guess you could say your story as a youngster, when many people or many young men don't succeed when they have that sort of family dynamic, how would you explain your success based on coming from that environment?
Well, I guess it was a different era. My mother was she was a mother and a father for she's a pretty strong person, and as I point out in my autobiography, we lived in the Richard Allen housing project, and for poor people, and my sister and I were for a good part of our lives there. We were the only kids in the neighborhood that did not have a father in the house. Because female-headed families, female-headed black families were not that large back in the 40s, 50s, and even earlier, as they are today. So, my mother was she was a very demanding person, and she had many of the from her demands. I had many of the benefits of having a father.
Okay. Yes, that's wonderful. So, and we'll come back to, I've of course read some of your articles related to Black Fathers Matter. So we'll return to that. But one thing that struck me again through my research was that you said the Civil Rights Act of the 60s was a major error. That's obviously maybe not shared by a lot of African Americans. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I meant that when I said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 should have said something like this. The Constitution of the United States also applies to every single American, regardless of his skin color, as opposed to what we did get that led to racial quotas and all kinds of divisions in our country. That is, the black Americans at one time did not have the constitutional guarantees as everybody else. And I think that in 1964 or whenever that the Congress should have just said amended I should have just said the Constitution of the United States also applies to black Americans.
Gotcha. And just as an aside, Dr. Williams, were you active as doing any activism during the 60s?
Well, I was during during the 50s, when I was in the Army, and maybe slightly before, I was fairly active in terms of demanding civil liberties. Matter of fact, if you look at my autobiography, I had a lot of problems in the Army because I was sent down to Fort Stewart, Georgia, without a very good orientation on the Southern way of life. And I resisted the Southern way of life. And it was my first time in seeing colored waiting rooms, white water fountains, and colored water fountains for the first time. And of course, there was discrimination in Philadelphia, but we did not have the explicit forms of discrimination as I saw in 1959 when I first went to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Okay, and just at that point in your development of an ideology, were you influenced through the Libertarian movement at that time, or not yet?
No, I wasn't. I was more a follower of Malcolm X. I did not buy into what Martin Luther King was talking about, but more a follower of Malcolm X.
Okay, and so, well, just curious, since you did bring that up, did you become Muslim? Were you considering that at all? Never. Okay. So with that, what was it about, I guess, Malcolm X's message versus Martin Luther King's? What was it that appealed to?
I didn't buy into the turn the other cheek philosophy of Martin Luther King, and I thought that maybe just breaking the laws and engaging in demonstrations and violence even to get our constitutional guarantees.
Okay. So since you brought that up,
I was a bit of a radical.
Okay, and I did hear you say that in one of your videos there. So so you were that at that tender age, as you developed your philosophy and ideology over, like you said, 50 years. Did that radical, mindset, did that continue at all, or no?
Well, the radical ideas led me more towards the libertarian point of view. That is, I believe that nobody should interfere with me so long as I don't interfere with anybody else, and that I have certain rights as a human being, and I'm not imposing any obligations on other people except that of non-interference.
Okay. So, Dr. Williams, would the current, climate and movement with Black Lives Matter and the violence and so forth, would that be consistent with the way you thought at that point?
No. I don't think that I would have ever thought of engaging in the kinds of actions that I've seen on television, looting and burning and shooting people and things like this. No.
So when you said a few minutes ago about violence, did you mean a different style or different kind?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you said a couple of minutes ago that you were more on the Malcolm X side of belief, and so what I'm asking.
So if got your back.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. All right. That clears that up. Okay. So thank you for that. So Dr. Williams, making a little pivot here, again, be sensitive to your time. One of your messages in one of your pieces, you talked about spiritual poverty. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, I meant that there's virtually no material poverty in the United States, and there's no material poverty among blacks. If you look at poor blacks, you see they've got cell phones, a car, and washing machines, and all these other kind of things that middle class people did not have in the 60s and 70s. But so there's no material poverty, but there's poverty of the spirit. And when I say poverty of the spirit, I mean that people have become they become dependent on other people. They have engage in self-destructive behavior, and perhaps one of the most self-destructive behaviors is the out of wedlock birth rate among blacks, which is close to 75%. And a lot of people will blame that on the legacy of slavery and discrimination, but that's nonsense, because in 1938 and 1940, the illegitimacy rate among blacks was 11%, and that among whites was 3%. And then today, among whites, it's over 30%. And so, and then what you see in our schools, where when I went to school in Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin High School. I went to Benjamin Franklin High School was the lowest ranking school at the time. It's in North Philadelphia, and the only time we saw a policeman in school was during an assembly period where we had to listen to a boring lecture by Officer Friendly on safety. Now, Philadelphia school system hires 400 policemen, students cursing and beating up teachers. Now, all those black people who are dead now, long gone, who fought hard and gave up blood, sweat, and tears for blacks to be able to go to school, get into schools, they must feel, if they were alive, they would feel a great sense of betrayal with the kind of things that black people are doing in schools today. In Baltimore, for example, in I think 2015, 2016, on an average of 4 teachers were assaulted each school day of the year. Now, the people who fought when demonstrations in the 40s and 50s for blacks to have educational opportunities, damn sure were not looking for blacks to get in school and behave the way that many blacks are behaving today. And there's an effect of it. Again, in Baltimore, and it's the same in other cities, that in 13 of Baltimore's 39 high schools, not a single student tests proficient in math, and only 3 or 4% test proficient in English and reading. And for the whole city of Baltimore, only 15% test proficient in reading. That's a hell of a way to start out in life. You're 18 years old, you can't read or write or add, and that's not a very good start in life.
Absolutely. So with that, obviously, Dr. Williams, we are in an election year, and one thing that I saw that you had discussed, you said you don't see much progress that blacks can make through the political arena, and you also said economic power is not born from political power. Can you just kind of touch on that, because it's a very significant year?
Well, if you look at the cities in our country where a large percentage of the black community are living under horrible conditions, such cities such as Detroit, Baltimore, Birmingham, Philadelphia, Chicago. In those cities, very often, a black is the mayor, chief of police, superintendent of schools, and almost for more than a half century, the city's been run by Democrats. So if political power meant anything, then you expect to find that these cities would be paradises instead of hellholes as they are. In just last weekend in Chicago, 104 people were shot and 14 murdered. I mean, and matter of fact, in Chicago so far this year, has only 3 people been killed by police, and that's a tragic circumstance that people just they don't ignore. They just ignore that. They don't say very much about that. They worry about what the police are doing, and of course, nobody wants to defend improper behavior by a policeman, but what police are doing is not the major problem that black people face.
Okay. Excuse me. So, you mentioned about political power not being the answer. So, what would you say are things that would make a substantial impact on the quality of life and the direction of African Americans, specifically in those cities you mentioned?
Well, you look at one example of the lack of a connection between political power and economic power is that if you take Asian Americans, take Japanese have no political power, even in the areas where they're the most numerous, such as San Francisco or in California in general. But however, Japanese Americans are staying at the very top of the socioeconomic ladder in terms of income, education, family stability, low crime rates, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but on the other hand, down through the ages in our country, the Irish have had considerable political power, but they've been the slowest rising of any of the white ethnic groups. And so, or you take Jews. Jews had a hell of a lot of economic power before they had political power. And I think that what black people need to do is to come early and stay late. But on the other hand, I would say something else that's often ignored when you look at black people in our country. And I've said this a number of times in some of my publications that I've offered evidence for it, is that that black Americans as a group have made the greatest gains over some of the highest hurdles in the shortest period of time than any other racial group in the history of mankind. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not problems along a major segment of the black community, but black people as a group have made major gains. Now, for example, if you add up all the income that black Americans earn and thought of us as a separate nation with our own GDP, we'd be in the top 20 richest nations and well within the top 20 richest nations on the face of the earth. It was a black American who was the head of the world's mightiest military. Some black Americans are some of the world's wealthiest people. Many black Americans are the world's most famous people. And indeed, there was a black American who became president of the United States. Now, the significance of all this is that in 1865, at the end of the Civil War, neither a slave nor a slave owner would have believed that these kind of gains would have been possible in slightly over 100 years, 150 years. And as such, it speaks to the moral and the intestinal fortitude of the people who made these kind of gains against awful odds in such a short period of time. And as well, it speaks of the greatness of a nation in which these gains were possible. That is, these gains that Black Americans made would have been impossible anywhere on the face of this earth except that of the United States. Now the question that's before us is how can these gains be extended to a large segment, maybe 25% of the Black community, for whom they've been elusive for quite a while. And one of these, one of the ways that we can extend these gains is just to stop doing what we have been doing. That is making it easy for people to live slovenly lives.
Okay, and you have spoken a lot about I guess the welfare state that was developed, and so are you I guess linking that to what you just said about the slovenly lives?
Yes, that is. Ask any economist, whether he's a liberal or a conservative, and if you say, and he'll tell you that if you tax something, you're going to get less of it, and if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. And what we've been doing is subsidizing slovenly behavior. We've been making it so that a girl can live reasonably well without and have a family without a man present. We made it easy for men just to abandon their families because the family will just get welfare, and that's not a very good set of incentives to provide people, and what the welfare state, as I point out in many of my publications and with evidence, the welfare state has done to Black Americans what slavery could not have done. The racist, harshest Jim Crow and racism could not have done, namely destroy the Black family. That is, it turns out that Herbert Gutman, he's done research on this area, on Black families, and he points out that more Black kids lived in biological mother and father households during slavery than live now with a mother and father in the household. And in 1925 New York, 85% of Black kids lived in two-parent families. Today, roughly around a third live in two-parent families. So you have to say, well, what in the hell happened between 1880 and where Black families were just like white families, intact, and later periods up until 1960? What in the world happened? I mean, you can't. And a lot of people want to blame it on the legacy of slavery, discrimination, racism. Well, you say, well, if racism and slavery and discrimination is the cause, how come it was not much worse when Blacks were far closer to slavery? That is in the 1880s or 1925. How come it was not worse? And so the point, Todd, is that look, if I'm a doctor, if you come to me and you have a pain in your stomach, and I say, well, it's caused by your ingrown toenails. Well, if your ingrown toenails don't have anything to do with the pain in your stomach, I can treat your ingrown toenails all I want, but you're still going to have the pain in the stomach. That is, and I'm saying that if we keep on saying, well, slavery, discrimination explains what we see today, we can try to march, we can say we shall overcome, we can intimidate white people and all this kind of stuff, but that's not the cause of our problems. The cause, as Charlie Brown says, we met the enemy and it's us. That is, you have to ask the question, who is responsible for just things like Black kids not learning in school? Or who is responsible for Black kids beating up teachers? Who's responsible for, last week in Chicago, 104 people being shot and 14 dead? Who is responsible for it? Now, if you say, oh, well, it's white people, it's slavery, well, you can do all you want. You can talk to white people all you want, but the murder is going to continue.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Williams, with that being said, you say that the responsibility, to correct those things fall on Black people, and like you mentioned the welfare state, but you think that's maybe the impetus of it, but the responsibility to restore things falls on Black people.
Yes, yes. I mean, if you look at what's going on in our neighborhoods, just one thing, the murder, the mayhem committed by blacks, where mothers are sent in some neighborhoods, in some days, serving the children on the floor so they won't get hit by stray bullets. Don't let them sit out on the porch because they're afraid to drive by and all this kind of stuff. Well, yeah, that's black people have to take care of that. Now white people, even if the mayor is white, or black, he wants to do something about it. Well, he's not going to do anything about it because he's going to run into a whole lot of flack. He's going to be called racist and stuff like this. So what that means is that black people in the community, they're going to have to do it. One example, I believe it was either Detroit or Camden, New Jersey. On Halloween, they used to have Devil's Night, where the people set buildings on fire, set apartment buildings on fire, and all this kind of stuff. And the police weren't doing very much. And so black people, one year, black people went out there. They had guns and bats and stuff like this, and they said that anybody starting a fire, they're going to beat the hell out of them. And so it turned out that Devil's Night disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, what I'm saying. So now just, we see, through your verbiage about the responsibility, based on, Black people correcting their own problems. So as far as discrimination, does that play a role at all, or?
Well, the kind of discrimination that exists today, it just does not explain very much. And I'm not saying it does not play any role, but that's not the major problem. I want somebody to tell me how discrimination plays a role in the breakdown of the black family. Mm-hmm. How discrimination plays, or racial discrimination plays a role in all the murder that you see in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago. And if you say it's discrimination, well, you're going to keep on saying the murders. Mm-hmm. Because that's not the cause of the problem, this discrimination. And so I'm the last one to say that every single vestige of discrimination has been eliminated. But however, the discrimination does not begin to explain the major problems that Black Americans face.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Williams, as far as the what this generation can do, because obviously we both agree that this is going to be this will require a full effort on behalf of Black people, and that it will take several generations for corrective measures to get us to where we need to be. But if you had advisement about this generation, especially with maybe men who are fathers who are active, what would you see about correcting some corrective measures that could be done?
Well, I don't have all the answers, and I don't have the solutions. But one thing is clear is that we have to stop doing what we've been doing. And I believe that we should have the kind of society where people find their own solutions to their own problems, as opposed to having the solutions parachuted into them, and where the outsiders play a great role. And I think that this, there's, I don't know whether you know a guy, Bob Woodson. He set up years ago the Center for Neighborhood Enterprises, and his argument is that that most of the money going to deal with poverty are going to poverty workers. They're going to what I call poverty pimps. That is people who use the misery of many black people to feather their own nests. And so the solutions have to come from the bottom up as opposed to the solutions being imposed from the top down. And so people have to find their own solutions to their own problems, and allow them to do so. For example, with education, I believe that black parents should have school choice. They should be able to choose where they send their kids, as opposed to the mandates of the National Education Association. And it turns out my colleague and longtime friend Tom Sowell, he's just finished a book. Matter of fact, his 56th book, and it's called Charter Schools and Their Enemies. And it shows that, and he points out, he does a very extensive study of how black kids in New York City who are going to charter schools do much better than black kids who are going to the regular public schools. But the Mayor de Blasio and the NAACP and the education establishment is attacking the charter schools. And one of the reasons is that teachers who teach at charter schools, by and large, are not members of the union, and then they don't want to be embarrassed. And very often, the charter schools are in the same building that the public schools are in, but yet the black kids who are going to the charter schools are doing much, much better than the kids who are going to the public school. And matter of fact, there's one charter school, Success Academy, where black kids in last year in the New York State math test scored higher than the average for the whole state of New York. Now, it seems to me that you want to encourage more of these kind of opportunities for rather than to discourage it. Or what a lot of black leaders are saying, they're saying, well, we don't want to destroy the public school system. And so in a sense they're saying that in a sense their argument does not differ from one that says no black kids should be educated until all black kids should be educated. But however, it turns out that public school teachers in Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, and other cities, they have a greater percentage of their kids are in non-public schools, parochial school and private schools. Politicians in Washington, D.C., that in the Congress, they would never send their kids to the horrible schools in Washington, D.C. What they send their kids, where they send their kids, are to the private elite schools. Because, and I don't blame them. I mean, I wouldn't want to send my kid to a school where he's going to be beat up, raped, or shot, or knives, or stuff like this.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So
anyway, I had time for one more question.
Okay, this is a two-part, just related to again this forthcoming election. You had mentioned in one of your videos, the Reason TV video, that during President Barack Obama's first term, that you felt like he didn't do a good job. Now, of course, he's done his presidency. Did your vision, or not? Did your analysis change, or do you still feel the exact same way?
I don't see anything that changed my analysis there.
Okay.
If you look at the problems that black people face, the problems are just as prevalent now. As they were before Barack Obama took office.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's the whole notion I mentioned earlier that political power does not translate very easily into economic power for a people. It means political power, but the fact that Barack Obama was the president, it meant a whole lot to the upper class blacks. Blacks who had a college education, that were connected, and they got all kinds of jobs, they got all kinds of grants and things like this. But in the neighborhoods, poor black neighborhoods, it didn't mean very much.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you know, like one of my nieces, she was campaigning heavily for Barack Obama, and she lived near Broad and Erie. And I asked her, I said, now, what do you, even before he became president, what do you think what impact do you think that's going to have in Broad and Erie, where people are hanging on corners, intimidating people and stuff like this? And she thought it would do something, but still, she still lives in the same neighborhood, and she's still scared to walk home from the Broad and Erie train station.
Gotcha. And the second part of that, which is my closing question. So, just to be fair, so we talked about President Obama. What's your view on President Trump's efforts?
Again, it's the issue of you're not going to get much salvation through the political arena. That is, I think that if you look at things like, I don't know whether we want to attribute all of it to a president, but the unemployment rate among blacks before this meltdown pandemic was lowest in our history, and that's something that needs to be encouraged. I mean, black teenage and black adult employment has been some multiple of whites, but it went down significantly, and it went down not because of any policies that Trump had towards blacks, but simply because of deregulation and the tax cuts that he encouraged.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, that is, if you do something that will benefit all Americans, then surely blacks are part of Americans and they will benefit. You don't have to have any particular policy aimed specifically towards blacks. Let me just give you one example because I did a whole lot of study of it. Is that take in 1926 or 1920, a poor illiterate Italian, he could go out and buy a used car and write the word taxi on it, and he was in business, providing an income for his family. Today, in New York City, if one wanted to get into the taxi business, it's changed some today because of Uber and Lyft, but let's say 10 years ago, if one wanted to get in the taxi cab business, he would have to go out and buy a license, they call it medallion in New York, for $700,000. Now, who does that impose a hardship? It imposes a hardship on anybody who does not have $700,000 laying around or can't get bank credit to get a loan for $700,000. So if you get rid of the licensing, you don't have to have any particular racial policy. If you say, we're going to get rid of the licensing, occupational licensing of taxi cabs, you open opportunities for everybody.
Right.
So you don't have to make a explicit black program. You just say, well, we're gonna have more freedom to get in business. Mm-hmm. And so if you provide more people more freedom to get in business, they'll get in business. And you see a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are black people.
Yes. Yes.
And so the point is that public policy is, I mean, my idea has always been public policy should not be directed towards any particular racial group. It should be directed towards directed towards human beings. Mm-hmm. That is, making it possible for a human being who wants to work to be able to work.
Yes.
Or make it possible a human being who wants to get into business can get into business. That is, free up the economic system.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, I would just say, back to your point about the, Trump and the employment gains for blacks, they've largely been erased, due to his poor leadership about the pandemic. Would you?
Yes, right. Yeah.
But anyway, Dr. Williams, of course, I don't want to, take up more of your time. I really appreciate you joining me, and it's been very insightful. It's been educational for me as well, and you continue to be safe and in good health.
Okay, and give Mom my regards.
Absolutely. Take care, Dr. Williams.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.